Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and magic puzzle boxes. I'm Noah Hook, and we finally made it, folks. We're on the 10th and currently final episode of the Hellraiser saga with 2018's Hellraiser Judgment. Judgment follows Detective Sean Carter as he stumbles into the world of Pinhead and pals while investigating a serial killer. It sounds very similar to Inferno, but I promise Judgment deviates itself enough from its predecessors to be something a little bit different. After nearly 3 decades of working on Hellraiser films, Gary J. Tunnicliffe was finally given the chance to direct. He had written the terrible story for Revelations, but was unable to direct due to scheduling conflicts. Being very disappointed with the final product, he wrote up a new story, one that was meant to be Hellraiser from its very beginning. Dimension had no interest in immediately starting another Hellraiser project, so Tunnicliffe attempted to make the movie independently, but failed to raise enough funds. He continued pitching the idea to Dimension, but eventually 5 years came around and they needed to make another movie to keep the rights. After some rewrites and edits, they finally allowed Tunnicliffe to direct Judgment with his script. Once again, the studio only gave out a measly $350,000 to fund the project. Tunnicliffe reached out to Doug Bradley about reprising his role as Pinhead, but the quality of the previous films and him having to sign a non-disclosure agreement kept him away again. Paul T. Taylor, who is primarily a TV actor, was cast as Pinhead. Tunnicliffe wanted to update Pinhead a bit. In Judgment, he is very cold, arrogant, sarcastic, almost bored with the constant torment that surrounds him. Special effects artist Mike Regan returned to reprise his role as the Chatterer. Regan has been working on makeup effects for Hellraisers since Bloodline and has been playing Chatterer since Inferno. Regan teamed up with Mike Miesemer to lead the makeup effects for Judgment. Another Hellraiser vet, Miesemer has been doing effects for Hellraiser since Deader. Gary Tunnicliffe himself ended up playing a new character called the Auditor. I think it's really exciting to see these special effects artists work together and get so involved in the movie to make it happen. Judgment was a considerable jump in quality, almost unanimously considered one of the best straight-to-video sequels for the Hellraiser series, which isn't saying much, but it's something at least. That's not to say it's a unanimously well-regarded film. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 50% from critics and a 26% audience score. So with audiences, it's around the same league as Deader, and with critics, it's somewhere between Hellbound and Hell on Earth, which is not a bad place to sit. But it's important to note that Judgment has very few reviews, so the numbers are probably going to change as time goes on, probably in the down direction. But the overall consensus is this is the first Hellraiser in a long time that tries to have a purpose and do something interesting with its time and material. So it sounds like we're going to have a bit of a mixed bag here. Let's find out and start judging Hellraiser Judgment. We open on Pinhead and the Auditor discussing how the lament configuration is no longer an efficient way to lure sinners and sadomasochists in a world where people have access to limitless suffering on the internet, though they seem to be coming up with some new ideas. We cut to Carl Watkins, a pedophile and child murderer who has received a mysterious letter that vaguely promises to help him in his endeavors. He arrives at 55 Ludovico Place, which is the same address as the Cotton House, but unfortunately they couldn't get the original building. He enters the house and goes unconscious. When Carl awakes, he is strapped to a chair and greeted by the Auditor. He is played by Gary Tunnicliffe, who doesn't have a ton of acting experience, but I really liked him as the Auditor. His design is simple but effective, and he has a lot of snark and humor to him, making him a fun counterpart to our very serious Pinhead.
Jesus Christ. Heavens, no. Same city, completely different zip code.
The Auditor is the first step in the Stygian Inquisition, which is essentially an assessment of the captive's sin. The members of the Inquisition are not Cenobites, they are their own separate faction in hell. The Auditor suggests Carl stop asking stupid questions so they can get on with the Inquisition. They begin, and Carl is forced to confess all of the horrible things he has done in life, and the Auditor writes these details down in Carl's blood, with the typewriter hooked up to his body. Carl has finally finished spilling his disgusting beans, so it's time for phase 2 of the process. In comes the Assessor, played by John Gulager. He whips out his dandy bottle of children tears, which is the dressing to his paper salad. This guy starts fucking guzzling the wet, dripping paper, and I'm gonna spare your eyes for most of it. It's one of the grossest things I've watched in a while. The assessor starts throwing up into a funnel, which Carl thinks is just him getting sick, but it is actually the beginning of the next step in the Inquisition. The puke flows down a tube where it travels to the jury, 3 topless, faceless chicks. The jury then just fucking rubs their fucking hands through the fucking puke. Judgment has doubled down, maybe tripled down, on the gross out gore. Through that disgusting process, the jury finds Carl guilty of his confessed crimes. Carl asks the auditor if he will be rewarded, and the auditor tells him this is his reward. Now that Carl has been found guilty, he has to go to the cleaners. Once again, the cleaners consist of more naked women. Hooray. It isn't completely shown what the cleaners do, but based off what they say, it seems like they are licking him inside and out. Don't worry, you sick bastards, you'll get to see the full process later. Oh look, it's Pinhead, he's in this movie. Oh shit, did I accidentally put on Silent Hill? Nah, this big boy is the Butcher. But it isn't his turn to have fun quite yet. Out pops Psycho Mantis, I mean the surgeon, who proceeds to hack Carl up real good. Apparently the surgeon's cuts are more precise than you might think, as Carl's skin peels off perfectly in one big piece, with a really gross looking practical effect that I love. The jury is back for more because fuck it, and they each get hosed with blood. I think this is mostly just because Gary Tunnicliffe likes boobs. It doesn't seem very important to the plot. From what I can tell, Carl is dead and we won't be seeing any more of him. And we made it to the credits. Nope, not the end of the movie. That was the first 12 minutes. I always think it's interesting when horror movies decide to extend their kill a random person intro past like 5 minutes. I know this was to prepare us for it happening again, but it's definitely an interesting start. We open on drunk socialite Crystal Lanning, played by Grace Monty, as she returns to her apartment and finds all of the lights off. She assumes it's an ex-boyfriend and is instantly DTF. Once she realizes the lights are actually cut and her dog is missing, she gets concerned, but by then it's too late as she gets bonked in the face by a masked attacker.
What do you want?
To make a lesson out of you.
15 minutes in, we finally meet our protagonists, brothers and detective partners Sean and David Carter, who are on their way to the Crystal Lanning crime scene. Sean is played by Damon Carney from Logan and The Lone Ranger, and is the older, grumpier, and quieter of the two. David, played by Randy Wayne from Honey 2 and The Dukes of Hazzard: The Beginning, is a bit more upbeat and talkative. But Sean has his own interests as well, specifically literature, as he compares Crystal Lanning to a character from A Tale of Two Cities, but he doesn't care to explain it to his brother or the audience. They arrive at the crime scene where they find Crystal laid out with the message "I am a jealous god" in blood, as well as a video on loop.
Worship this little guy. I worship this little guy. I worship this little guy.
They believe this to be the work of a serial killer they've been investigating known as the Preceptor, who kills people for their sins in relation to the 10 Commandments. They get spooked by Detective Christina Edgerton, played by Alexandra Harris from All Light Will End, who has been newly assigned to the Preceptor case. Christina finds this display a bit dull for the Preceptor. That is until they realize there's something moving around inside her. Oh no, it's the dog! The dog is named Baby, and because this woman loved her dog, the Preceptor put Baby in her womb. That's a bit of a stretch for this being a kill based on worshipping false gods. Hail Baby! Hey, at least the dog unrealistically survived. We interrupt this program to bring you Puzzle Box. As Christina gets cozy in her new man cave, Sean realizes he is out way too late on a very special night. His wife Allison's birthday.
Happy birthday to me.
Oh.
I'm not out here to defend cops or shitty husbands, but he was just at a murder scene and watched a dog come out of someone's body. Fuck your cake. Next morning at the station, the boys fill Christina in on what they know. There are only 2 sins left: thou shalt not steal and thou shalt not covet. Sean also explains the meaning of his title, describing a preceptor as a teacher responsible to uphold law or tradition, in this case the 10 Commandments. The preceptor has also written to the detectives quite a few times, specifically on an old typewriter. They ask Edgerton why she was added to the case, but she assures them it has less to do with their handling of the case and more to do with catching the guy quickly. One classic police montage later, and we're no closer to catching the guy, but we get some bones being cut and some teeth being pulled. The next morning, our detectives enter a new crime scene. Upon a kid's playset are 8 severed hands along with lots of blood, eyes, and teeth. And why were these people chosen by the preceptor? They were surely hardcore criminals, no? No? They were teen girls charged with petty theft. I'm beginning to get the suspicion the preceptor isn't very fond of women. We learn that there were 4 victims, and their hands were cut off while they were alive and filled with epoxy to make them stiff. Hi, Pinhead! Oh, Pinhead is sleepy. Meanwhile, David has made a breakthrough in connecting the victims. Luckily, this only involves the victims we've seen already. The 4 teens who were killed all went to the same school, and that school recently filed a restraining order against Carl Watkins for jerking off at the girls from outside. Cool. Apparently, Crystal also went to that school years ago, which is probably unrelated, but the Carl Watkins guy is at least worth looking into. We hop on over to his dingy apartment.
He's not in. That cocksucker owes me 2 months' rent.
Heather Langenkamp, yes, Nancy, plays Carl's foul-mouthed landlord. The casting director for Judgment knew Heather and showed her the screenplay. Tunnicliffe was excited to have her even for a tiny role. She happily lets the cops into Carl's apartment. Inside they find porn, a pile of newspapers with preceptor headlines, porn, and a mysterious letter, which they take with them. But I guess this isn't the letter from the auditor? I'm not sure what it is, but regardless, the letter leads to absolutely no leads. So Sean returns to the apartment that night and hacks into Carl's laptop, which aside from porn, only has one recent search. It's the Addy to the auditor's house. Sean arrives to the house, but as he enters, he is greeted by the auditor and seems to pass out. And oh boy, Sean has gotten himself into a pickle. Sean doesn't waste the auditor's time with the usual sniveling questions and even throws some verses at him.
Only God can judge me. And God will judge both the righteous man and the wicked man.
Ecclesiastes 3:17.
Deuteronomy 21:9.
The auditor appreciates good company, so explains the puzzle boxes and their function to Sean and confirms they are no longer on Earth. Sean knows he won't be going anywhere until the auditor gets what he wants, so they begin the inquisition. We learn that Sean has enjoyed hurting people since he was a little boy and ends up having a novel-long confession, which must have taken a lot of blood from him. In comes the assessor, so you know what's coming. I am genuinely impressed at how well this guy can shove paper into his mouth with a fork and knife. Uh-oh. It seems Sean's confession was too much for the assessor, causing him to spew black goo. The auditor finds the jury is also overwhelmed with blood puke, and despite not receiving a verdict, tells Sean he is to be cleaned anyway. This is interrupted by the angel Jophiel, played by Helena Grace Donald. We've finally gone into full Christian territory. While the Cenobites were once considered extra-dimensional beings, they have slowly made their transformation into pretty straightforward demons from hell, and now we're pretty much here. Jophiel tells the auditor to release Sean without giving an explanation as to why. The auditor is confused but agrees to do so because apparently the angels or God or whoever are in charge. But before that happens, we get to see what the cleaners do. Yay! Sean wakes up strapped down on a table as the naked women emerge. They tear his clothes off, start licking him and pouring their spit into a cup and pour it into his mouth. So that's what they mean when they say cleaned on the inside too. We do see Sean slip one of his hands loose as we thankfully cut away. The auditor goes to discuss the situation with Pinhead, who has to keep Chatterer from fucking him up. We also meet the Stitch twins, another rendition of the original Stitch. I don't know if one of them is the original or not. Pinhead tells the auditor not to let Sean go. He is tired of heaven trying to meddle in hell's affairs. This is the most powerful and intimidating Pinhead has felt in quite a while. Unfortunately, the auditor returns to find that Sean has killed the cleaners, taken a puzzle box, and escaped. Pinhead tells him not to worry. Back to Sean, who must be rushing the fuck home. Oh, never mind. He's hanging out by a water tower. He calls David out to meet him and, without any explanation, brings him back to the house. They run in, guns drawn, but there's no blood, no pins, not even a little bit of spit.
Alston is worried about you.
Oh, you'd know that.
Man, we're all worried about you, Sean.
Wink wink. After downing some alcohol and admiring the box, Sean finally goes to bed. But it's hard to sleep when the Stitch twins and Chatterer are boiling your eyes. Sean wakes up in a panic and Alston consoles him, which eventually turns into sex, but even that is overrun with Cenobite thoughts. Sean just fucking leaves in the middle of the night and drunkenly wanders an alley. Sean starts hallucinating a skinless derelict, a dead ram, and the jury as they all come in for a close-up. This scene was originally a bit more depraved. It involved Alston having a threesome with 2 men in pig masks, one up front and one in the back. I'm not usually one for studio interference, but it's probably good they nixed to this one. They did let Gary have a lot of fun with this movie, to be fair. The next morning, Christina starts asking David a bit about his brother. The usual stuff, how he adjusted after war, his alcoholism, whether or not he could sever teen arms. But this conversation is interrupted as David gets a call from Alston.
It's Alston. Hey, you.
Wink wink. David tells Christina Sean's car broke down when in reality he is passed out against the side of the house. Sean ignores David's concern and minimizes the situation as he goes to get cleaned up. David happens to notice A Tale of Two Cities on a shelf and flips through it, and he notices a couple lines that are similar to the Preceptor's writings that are underlined and highlighted. David takes a picture of the text, but that's all for now. David tells Christina about the weird coincidence, but Sean enters and gets a phone call from the morgue, who has a new finding. Christina offers to go with him while David stays and tries to connect Sean to the Preceptor. On the way there, Christina slyly notes that the Preceptor's writings are very well written and was wondering if he had noticed any notable lines that may be references. At first he says no, but then he mentions the 2 lines from A Tale of Two Cities, which somewhat eases her suspicion. The mortician tells the detectives that the Preceptor shoved Crystal Lanning's phone down her throat, and that the phone had an app that recorded her location, indicating that she was taken to a different place to be killed and brought back to the apartment. They head over to the recorded address and immediately break in without a warrant. After a bit of wandering, they find the red-lit room from earlier, covered in newspaper articles, a typewriter, and photos of all the Preceptor victims. I think we're in the right place. There's even a little curtain to unveil the final victim. How festive. Yeah, I think we saw this coming. Sean was really the only option, and it was alluded to in the movie like 10 different times. Never fear, Christina. David is on the case. Oh shit, come on, David. We get a flashback as to how David figured out the killer is Sean. He looked up a phrase he said to him earlier, which for some reason came up with the word Preceptor in a nearby paragraph, and that somehow makes him the killer. Not the most thrilling whodunit, but I've seen worse, specifically in this franchise. Sean knew his brother would need to see it to believe it, so no backup is coming. Oh, damn it, Alston, not you too. The movie finally confirms that Alston was having an affair with David, and that Alston was cheating on him for years while he was in the military. I think this is what created that hate for women I mentioned earlier. But instead of killing them in whatever way he previously planned, he now intends to have them open the box. It literally starts sparking the second they touch it and takes literally 3 seconds to open. Chains swing down, the Pillar of Soul spins, and Pinhead emerges. Sean unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, didn't watch Revelations and thinks it's a good idea to propose a trade, Alston and David for his soul. But Pinhead doesn't want some boring old adulterers, he wants the motherfucking Preceptor. Dumbass Sean tries to close the box, so Pinhead gives him a couple hooks to the hands. Pinhead tells Sean about all the horrible things that are in store for him, and dumbass David decides to chime in, which only gets himself and Alston impaled and dragged away to be tortured forever. Then the party is crashed by Jophiel again. She tells Pinhead to let Sean go. Pinhead has figured out that heaven wants him on Earth to put the fear of God into people. Pinhead and Jophiel argue for a bit, but he ultimately concedes and sends Sean back. Sean thinks he's forgiven by heaven, but Jophiel tells him he's just a tool to incite belief, but he will be going to hell one day. And he is immediately shot dead by Christina. Jovial is pissed. She thinks Pinhead knew that would happen and begins threatening him. He tells her he has nothing to fear, as pain is his pleasure and darkness is his home. So Pinhead says fuck it and hooks Jovial too. He pulls a bunch of pins from his head and sticks them into Jovial's, resembling Jesus' crown of thorns. He hooks her even more and de-skins her. Ooh, let me get that in slow-mo. The auditor questions if maybe that was a bad idea, but Pinhead says there is no punishment he fears. The auditor wonders if it would be possible for them to take his power away, and pink clouds, white clouds, and now Pinhead is a homeless guy on the street, mumbling about sweet suffering. Oh wow, that's the end of the movie. So, this was interesting. I have mixed feelings about Judgment. It is definitely a step up from Revelations and probably a few of the other older sequels too, but that isn't really saying much. But this is probably the first one since Inferno to really make me have an opinion about it. All of the Boda Hellraisers are just so boring and uninteresting that while I don't like them, I don't even care enough about them to hate them. Judgment at least captures my intention throughout the movie whether or not I like what I'm seeing. It is visually an interesting movie. There's good use of color and sound, and it looks surprisingly well for a movie made on such a small budget. And I personally enjoyed this inclusion of this new faction of Hell Dwellers. I do think they go a little too far into the gross out torture porn kind of area really often, and all of them except for the auditor feel just a little bit too human to me, but I overall like the premise of them. None of them will prove to be as iconic as Clive Barker's original Cenobites, but they hold their own for this movie. The acting is also just leagues better than Revelations. Nobody turned in a bad performance here. I really enjoyed Paul T. Taylor's rendition of Pinhead. It's fairly one note, but it's a solid note. He captures the elegance and commanding presence that the Priest of Hell would have. It's the story itself that lacked, especially within the human component of it. The Ten Commandment killer is just very unoriginal and overdone at this point, and in 2018 it's just not really an interesting subject. Sean hates technology and the youth. Whenever a killer starts bitching about cell phones, I just check out, I don't care. Unless he's older than I imagine, he would only be like a Gen X. He's not even that old. He should be pretty familiar with technology. And the twist that he is the killer, if you can even call it that, is not even a twist. It's really predictable. The addition of heaven was unnecessary. I wouldn't have minded it too much if it weren't for literally that last minute of the movie, but it is overall just a component we didn't need. Overall, Judgment isn't an award winner, but it took big swings and it paid off more than it didn't. It's a glimmer of hope as to what a Hellraiser could look like if it was given a real budget, and it at least cleanses our palate from the poop sandwich that was Revelations. So I guess the question is, what's next? There have been rumblings about a new Hellraiser reboot or remake for years, and it finally seems like it's gonna be happening? Ben Collins and Luke Piotrowski, writers of Super Dark Times and Siren, have been brought on to write, and David Bruckner, director of The Ritual, is set to direct. I love the monster from The Ritual, so I'm hoping these guys can come together and come up with some cool new Cenobites. Well, that's about it. We've made it through the entire Hellraiser series. But we aren't quite done with the Cenobites yet. Up next, I will be rating my top 10 Cenobites, rating them based off a variety of criteria. Then I will give my official ranking for all of the Hellraiser movies. I've watched them all, and it's finally time to decide which ones I hate most. And my final Hellraiser themed video for the foreseeable future will be me ranking every Pinhead. So I'll be looking at every Hellraiser movie and ranking that rendition of Pinhead with criteria like kills, dialogue, screen time, and things like that. Thanks for watching. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and this has been Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there.